pill. Orange pill. Orange pill.
Yeah, twang, 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 twang. Yeah, that Dr. Dre instrumental was awesome.
I don't think we'll have any copyright issues with that because it did not sound to me too much like that. So I am happy.
No, I filtered it through a mouthful of yam. That's a copyright killer. If you put yam in your mouth, they can't tag you for copyright violation. That's an old trick I learned back in the day.
You know, Max is a boomer, so to him, yam means like a sweet potato. It doesn't mean any of this DeFi sort of scammery, but we're going to get into that DeFi in a moment. I want to bring
I'm yielding. I'm yield farming right now in my mouth with the yams. Am I doing it right? How's this going? I thought that was the way to do it. And then you poop it out later. That's the yield. It's a poop yield. Yam in, poop out. I thought that's it. Am I doing that wrong?
We're going to actually get into alchemy in one moment because I find that a very interesting conversation, but I want to bring in the big picture, the framework for which we're going to frame this episode of Orange Pill, and that is two headlines from the physicists. I'm pretty convinced they gaslight the human beings around the world. I think there's a big campaign to gaslight us with quantum physics and mechanics. Well, physicists just found a new quantum paradox that casts doubt on a pillar of reality. This is what a paradox looks like, by the way.
Oh, yeah, exactly. A marble in a can.
Apparently, this might not be reality, so we're not real, possibly.
Cranberry. You know those jelly cranberries that come in a can? I never understood the appeal of those.
I used to like that, so I would have them every Thanksgiving.
Yeah, slice a jellied cranberry in a can. You know what's even more disgusting is Thanksgiving in a can, where you can buy this in the UK. They have turkey, gravy, stuffing, cranberry, pumpkin pie, all in a can. You can look this up. You can get it on eBay. You can get yourself some thanks. But the paradox is fascinating stuff. So the physicists are baiting us once again, with telling us that the physical foundation of our reality has come under increased scrutiny. And they've decided that the simulation is real, that we're living in a simulation. This is just another part of the physicists proving that we live in a simulation.
Well, I'm not a quantum physicist, but what I understand what this is trying to say is that, if they do those kind of studies like Schrodinger's cat. So like if Bob and Alice are in two rooms and they can only measure the particle either with velocity or distance traveled, or like these sort of unique elements to travel in time space. And apparently this study proves that Alice and Bob don't exist, and therefore we don't exist, and possibly none of this exists. And who knows what this is then. So this is what they're saying to us. So I guess they're kind of telling us to relax. This might not even be real, right?
It's obviously not real. And physicists are on their way to seeing the face of God, and then humanity evaporates in a cloud of smoke. That's the path that we're on. That's the path of discovery. That's the path of curiosity. Schrodinger's cat, what they're saying is the cat is neither dead or alive. There's no cat to begin with. It's not even a cat. It's a cat video within an enigma, within a meme.
Well, physicists are also saying something else. They said this week, wormholes large enough to travel through are possible. They say, first of all, don't worry, this might not necessarily happen. You need an immense amount of energy. Now, of course, that connects to Bitcoin, which focuses a lot of energy. But one thing they're saying is don't worry, we could create these human-sized wormholes, but fret not. The Princeton physicists behind the new research, which they shared online earlier this month, invoked a theory that involves breaking down the universe into 5 dimensions of warped geometry. through that theoretical framework, they say that stable, person-sized wormholes could exist, but it would take an ace pilot to travel through them. So I like to juxtapose headlines. Airline pilots landing at LAX report a guy in jetpack flying alongside them.
That's the guy. That's the wormhole guy. He's going to be making cat videos in a wormhole. But of course, wormholes are, I don't think we should be surprised because why, the universe is quite large, right? The multiverse, it's many hundreds of millions of light years across, right? So if we're going to explore it, we have to break all the boundaries of the physical world. We have to travel through wormholes. Obviously, I think that's pretty clear. That's what the next adventure is going to be. And the jetpack man, I mean, he could probably fit into a wormhole, find himself on Gilligan's Island. Gilligan's Island is, there's a whole universe of Gilligan's Island. Ginger is there. The skipper is still there. The Howells, are still there. And it's all happening on Gilligan's Island in a parallel universe as part of the multiverse. And getting there through a wormhole is, I think, more to be expected. We shouldn't be surprised by this. We should expect the wormhole. That's what I live my life by. Expect the wormhole.
Yes. And, in terms of these realities that aren't possibly reality, and perhaps they just feel like reality and it's not really reality, that would describe like every single cable news channel, every single chat board you go on to and Reddit or UFO Twitter. We were huge on UFO Twitter when apparently a UFO flew past our window when we were recording Kai's report in London. It didn't look like a UFO to me, but people thought it was like a UFO. And that brings me to this headline here from the New York Post, Max. UFO sightings are up 51% amid coronavirus data shows. So these wormholes could be real, or this is not real and we are real, but that story's not real, or the aliens are real and we're a part of their imagination.
Right. Well, wormholes is a two-way traffic, isn't it? So you've already got plenty of intelligent life traveling through wormholes since the beginning of the multiverse. And so we're now probably because the openings to these wormholes are shifting through the quantum soup. And so now one of the major wormhole vortexes has come close to our galaxy in our solar system. And so a lot of the inter-wormhole traffic is bleeding over into our galaxy and our solar system. So we're just seeing, it's like you suddenly, the off-ramp on a major highway was built next to your house. You're going to see a lot more trucks and cars and things going by your house because now there's a new off-ramp from the highway. So if a vortex to a wormhole opens up next to your solar system, you're going to see a lot more inter-wormhole travel vehicles, UFOs as we call them. And that makes perfect sense as well.
Again, we could just be spreading like physicist propaganda, gaslighting the people and trying to drive us crazy. But, it does make sense when you look at the headlines all day long, like we do for our various podcasts and programs. This one brought to you, of course, by thesunexchange.com/orange pill. But I'm going to show you this headline that I'm convinced is not real. This company is not real. I'm always doubtful that this thing exists, and yet it does seem to have an existence in this physical world. Pinterest pays $89.5 million to terminate San Francisco office lease. Now, we're all on social media, but I've never known anybody to ever use Pinterest. I hear of this company often just in headlines. How on earth did they have $89.5 million to terminate a San Francisco office lease? This company doesn't even exist, does it?
Yeah, I was surprised too because I had heard of Pinterest and I just thought it was like a bunch of old ladies that clip pictures from magazines and show their friends oh, I found this darling photo of a doll from the 1930s. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's probably worth $5 or $6 million, that company. But apparently it's worth $200 billion now. I guess that was an untapped. I have no idea what they do at Pinterest. I mean, what is it? You can pin an image. I think that's it. That's all that as far as I know. But it is obviously doing well.
Well, that's a good segue to go to another thing that I don't understand. I don't get. It's even more inexplicable to me than ICOs were, and that's this whole DeFi space. Does this hot dog exist or doesn't it exist? Is there a hot dog or is there not a hot dog? Well, the latest DeFi farming frenzy hot dog didn't last a day with a spectacular crash and the token's price just hours after launch. So, the chart suggests it was there, kind of like a proton being blasted out of some sort of super thing that they put in the Swiss mountains somewhere.
Particle accelerator.
Yeah, one of those things. So it's like, these are like weird quantum experiments, right?
There's quantum finance.
There was a hot dog there, now it's gone. It's like, oh, okay.
Exactly. It's quantum finance that exists or doesn't exist. And I'm not clear anyone's making any money or losing any money. I'm not sure this DeFi universe exists with all of these DeFi projects either. I'm not sure it's actually something that is relevant, exists in our plane of existence either. I don't think so.
There was a thing apparently called hot dog. Enough people on Twitter agree that there was something called hot dog. It was there. It's not there now. So you can't look for any evidence for it any longer, other than it's on a chart. There's a chart.
Well, it's financial antimatter. Those particle accelerators, they explore antimatter by the bubbles left by the particles, not the particles themselves, because they are too ephemeral. But the bubbles that they leave provide clues. So the hot dog DeFi has left a clue to its existence with the groans and screams of those who lost their money, apparently, or didn't lose whatever money they had. So we can judge the success or failure of a DeFi project by the level of screaming from the yam farmers. You know what they say, thing about outer space is you can't hear anyone scream. The same thing in the DeFi space. This is everyone is basically screaming, but it's inaudible because it's part of the quantum finance that may or may not exist.
Yeah, I get it now. All those telescopes like Hubble or big listening devices pointed out to outer space looking for evidence of aliens. We spend those billions and billions of dollars looking for just one little tiny, tiny blip. They get so excited that they found a blip from somewhere in outer space. Well, here we had the Pentagon just only a few months ago mentioned that there was some sort of craft they have that was not of this earth. And everybody's like, yeah, oh, well, I'm going to buy some hot dog.
Go back to the 90s and the SETI Project, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, right? So this was the first really use, or one of the very first uses of everyone can download the SETI software and join the network. And so you can donate your CPU, donate your computer power to sort through radio frequencies. So I've said and I've indicated that this is how Satoshi slipped in to our world, is through the SETI project, because all these projects, as I've said, are two-way. So we're out there searching through radio frequencies, and little did we know that this meme or this idea or this quantum idea slipped in through the SETI project and infected people's minds, like Adam Back and others and everyone else who was working on digital scarcity. And then they all coalesced and they crystallized and they had the insight. That's why Satoshi is anonymous, because it's an alien being that came in through the SETI project and kind of snuck, like a parasite, snuck onto people's hard drives without them knowing it and started to influence their behavior. And then the white paper came out, and that was the hard result of this. And then the actual software dropped. So this is an alien project. It became, obviously, Bitcoin at around block 300,000 became self-aware. I think that's something I noticed. And now it's basically taking over.
Well, there's that thing of the Philosopher's Stone. We were just talking about alchemy, essentially trying to turn hot dogs into Bitcoin, essentially, and that evaporated. But people as brilliant as Isaac Newton have been trying to, turn base metals into gold for centuries. You could turn a wafer and a glass of wine into the body and blood of Christ. These are the sort of
transubstantiation.
That's a kind of form of alchemy. You're trying to get, like, you, the ordinary human, are just a piece of meat that Christ died on the cross for, to be with God, because you are not godly.
The Eucharist.
And so you take the Eucharist, and to Catholics, this is the body and blood of Christ.
Right.
So,
That's what the Pope says.
yeah. So that is like a form of alchemy and transubstantiation. But you're saying, describing the other way is, you know, if you believe the Bible, you know, the story is God sent his son down here into this human meat form. He went from gold down to base metals. And that's the same thing you're saying with Satoshi came from an advanced society, an advanced essence from outer space. And
Right. Well, don't forget there's the third part to that triptych, and that would be the Holy Ghost, right? It's the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And the Holy Ghost is, in the Bitcoin world, is the code that slipped in through the SETI project in the 1990s onto some various hard drives, and then came eventually to the white paper, and then the Genesis block.
First infected the cypherpunks.
Yeah, and they call it the Genesis block, right? So that's one of the keys that it's the Holy Ghost that's part of the Catholic trilogy that goes back to the Revelation. And Michelangelo, if you look closely at the Sistine Chapel, when he touches God touches the hand of man, there's been some studies. If you look very, very, very closely, you see a private key is right there encoded. It's all mathematically depicted. It's one big depiction of a code of a private key.
Well, with this, I think this is a good moment to segue into an ad from our sponsor, because they have a form of transubstantiation, which is you convert solar power into Bitcoin. So take a look at this ad from thesunexchange.com.
SunExchange is the world's first peer-to-peer solar leasing platform. Earn Bitcoin solar power in communities in Africa and be part of the new world economy. Visit thesunexchange.com/orange pill and start monetizing sunshine today.
Sunexchange.com/orange pill. That's it. Got to go there. Now let's go to the guest. Who's introducing the guest, me or you?
Knut Svanholm, author of several books about Bitcoin, including Bitcoin Sovereignty Through Mathematics. His latest is titled Bitcoin Independence Reimagined. He's written an amazing piece for Citadel 21, Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole. So we're going to go deeper down the rabbit hole with him. Now, Knut, I'm going to read one great sentence from your piece that I really liked, and that is, Bitcoin is balancing on the edge of our understanding of the world between what is tangible and what can be imagined. So let's imagine Bitcoin. What did you mean by that? And like dig deeper in this rabbit hole of Bitcoin on the edge of understanding.
First of all, thank you for inviting me on. I've been following you for a long time,
pleasure.
guys. So good to be here. Yeah, that sentence. This is the third article I wrote for Citadel 21. And this is actually not a poster, but 1 out of 21 artworks or like paintings from Cypherpunk Now, Martin Schiffer. So he sent us, everyone that is featured on the cover here got one. And that's the 21st one that he's selling for 6.15 Bitcoin, believe it or not. So just a little background on that. And about the realness, like how Bitcoin is a connection between the imagination and reality, and in a way we haven't encountered before, is a part of the rabbit hole that has been fascinating me lately, a lot lately. And like when there's no difference between knowing and owning, when that line is blurred out, what does that do to human society? Because right now we have the technology to memorize, like I use seed phrase just, but it doesn't have to be a seed phrase. But the thing about Bitcoin is that the information representing the underlying asset is the underlying asset. There is nothing in between. So the information is actually valuable to someone. And when knowing and owning are the same thing, then money truly is a language. And our free speech laws and our freedom of expression laws are really put to the test, because there's no difference anymore between knowing something and owning something. And I think this is such a big part of the rabbit hole that it seems endless to me, because as I say in the article, when there's no way of knowing how much another person holds, how much wealth they hold in their heads, And this could be true for anyone, literally anyone on Earth could literally have any amount of money walking around, having them in their heads without anyone else knowing about it. They could be split up into smaller sums by remembering different seed phrases or different like locations of hardware wallets or whatever.
You know, one of the trends that makes this all possible going back 20, 30 years is the way that the economy has become less and less friction. There's less and less friction in the economy. And, you know, we're heading into what you're describing there as a frictionless economy without any friction whatsoever. So the idea of owning and knowing become synthesized into one experience. So the fact that, you know, as you say, the seed phrase doesn't have to be a 24-word seed phrase. The seed phrase can be a Lamborghini, an image of a Lamborghini, but that image of the Lamborghini in your mind and your imagination is the seed phrase to the proper amount of wealth that would give you ownership of a Lamborghini. So there's really no difference between owning that Lamborghini and owning that seed phrase that is the Lamborghini. And that's all possible because there's no friction anymore. So we're in a frictionless environment. And that's also an extension of this whole idea of, you know, back in the 90s, you know, there was a lot of study on what became known as increased return economics, right? So in economics, we're used to having diminishing returns. But in the 90s, with the advent of the crash or the deflation in the price of information processing, information storage, information, bandwidth, you know, you had the beginning of that network effect, which is but gave us things like social media, right? So it gave us things like an economy based on the increased returns instead of diminishing returns. So things suddenly were flipped on their head. But now it sounds what you're describing there is actually a new chapter where it's beyond just increased return network economics. It's about where, you know, we call it here like the global unconscious, where basically the consciousnesses are fused and you're kind of your whole attitude, your whole position in this frictionless world where money and not in power, where, as you put it, knowing is owning. There's a hugely positive element to it, Knut, because it destroys to some degree the notion of envy. Would you agree?
Yes, this is to my next point. Like, imagine a world in which everyone on Earth held 99% of their wealth in their heads in Bitcoin. Because of number go up technology, this is not an impossible scenario. It could happen in the future. We just need to, it just needs to be doing what it has already been doing for 11 years, right? It just needs to keep on doing that. And we could live in such a world. And in such a world, I imagine that, like, gaining something from robbing or like confiscating wealth from your fellow man will not be as profitable anymore. It will be much better to befriend the individual and provide something of value for him, because there's a much bigger reward at the end of that rainbow than at the coercion rainbow, if you follow me.
So the incentives are very different, because the incentive to rob, you know, to go to war, for example, to grab other countries' wealth and territory is very much based on the legacy thinking, where knowing and owning are not the same thing. Right. So now you are setting up an economy not based on greed, but more on altruism, where altruism becomes the predominant survival method.
Yeah, and that's how I view real capitalism, which I believe capitalism can't really exist without sound money. Without sound money, we don't have capitalism. We have something else. And the way I put it in the article is, when you cannot know how much a person owns and when you cannot take it by force, there's just no way of enriching yourself other than providing something of value to your fellow man. And this is this is the basic thesis of the Austrian School of Economics, right? Like, if we're free to interact with each other unviolently, the humane way, the civilized way, we exchange stuff with each other without frictionlessly. Is there even such a word? Frictionlessly?
Yes. Why not? Because you know what? We don't even know. Apparently, according to quantum physicists, this might not even be real. So words, how could they possibly be real if this reality isn't real? So I wanted to go back to that point that you made, that imagine a world where 99.9% of your wealth is in your head. Of course, that
everyone's wealth in everyone's head.
Yeah, everyone in the world is 99.9% of their wealth is in their head. So, you know, that's kind of profound, and that harkens back to the whole notion of the hippies and the peace movement of you know, John Lennon sang it, you know, imagine a world with no possessions. Like,
one of my first articles that I ever wrote was about the song Imagine, and how there was just one piece of the puzzle missing there. Because I think Imagine is one of the most profound songs of all time. And I agree with almost all of it, except he's missing the key piece of the puzzle, which, because he he wrote it way before 2009, obviously. So the missing key piece of the Imagine puzzle is Bitcoin. You say you want a revolution.
Yeah, and we've got it. We got Bitcoin. Is Bitcoin a revolution?
It is, and I've been thinking a lot about whether it will be the transition period into a hyper Bitcoinization, whether it will be violent or not. But the more I think about it, the more I think it will actually be. Regardless, it will be less violent than what we would have had if Bitcoin had not existed. So Bitcoin is the most peaceful way of transitioning into a sound money system.
Yeah, I made the comment last year, I believe. I said, oh, if Bitcoin came around 10 years earlier, we might not have seen 9/11.
No.
And a lot of people jumped on that and felt that they didn't understand what my point was there. But my point is just this: Bitcoin is peace, and it harbors peace. It incentivizes peace instead of incentivizing war, because the fiat money incentivizes war, because it's a Ponzi scheme that it has to be fed with more war. You know, without war, the fiat money Ponzi scheme would instantly collapse. With Bitcoin, it doesn't. As you point out, it disincentivizes, coercion, to use your word. The appropriation or coercion of property is de-incentivized to the point of oblivion, so that we actually would lose that as a memory, as a collective memory. Coercion would disappear. Like we have a tailbone, but we no longer, a coccyx, but we no longer have a tail, right? And it's a legacy part of our skeleton. So this word coercion might exist in some ancient dictionaries, but it would no longer be part of our collective wisdom or understanding, right?
It would be an appendix.
It would be an appendix. It would be used,
Yeah.
It's like the old words from 300 years ago that pop up every now and then, and people, study those words and their novelties. But this is, I think in a lot of ways, Bitcoin, the promise of Bitcoin is still a mystery that's being unraveled.
Yeah.
That there's so much more that we have to explore.
So much more.
Yeah.
Like I said, like the first time I transferred Bitcoin from one piece of paper to another, like there was something profound there. Like it truly was magic internet money, that you could turn one piece of paper worthless and the other one worth a lot by just scanning a QR code, and like nothing changed on the pieces of paper. It's just what we have in this collective imagination called that we all agree on, called the blockchain. There's where stuff changed, and like you can now tie value to physical things in a way that was completely impossible before. And you could turn like the worst car wreck ever into a Lambo by posting a QR code sticker somewhere on it to with a Lambo amount of Bitcoin on it. Like you can turn any object into a very valuable object, and you can do all sorts of things, which I believe we only just barely scratch the surface of what this means when information is literally valuable rather than metaphorically valuable or indirectly valuable. I think there's a whole ocean of stuff to explore there.
Right. So sticking on this theme of frictionless reality and how it relates to money, and then money becomes frictionless. And you mentioned something there about trade, and people are inherently prone to trade. Trading is something that's part of our DNA almost, and with that comes language, and with that comes this notion of mobility. And people, they're mobile, they're moving around, they're trading, they're using language, they're communicating, and they trade. And this is why gold became the most popular form of money for thousands of years, because it was reliable. It was a reliable medium of exchange that if I traded for gold, I could use it in a year from now or 5 years from now, and I could still use it as money. It would have a store of value. It would still work. People would still want it. So if all these things are collapsed in a frictionless, two-dimensional or omnidimensional or no-dimensional plane of existence where money and language and mobility are fused together, it's all the same thing. If I'm thinking and I'm part of this global unconscious about meeting somebody, and I am in fact at the same time meeting them, and we're trading and at the same time as well for something that we have mutually, instead of coercion, it's mutual. It's a revelation. There's a mutual revelation going on. We're suddenly, synchronicity is a huge part of this. Serendipity is a huge part of this, where people just show up and suddenly they're in a virtual reality space, and they're trading, and they're communicating, and they're doing all these things spontaneously corruption, spontaneous elimination of all corruption. So the channels are pure. All channels are light. There's no interference in any channel, vertical, horizontal. It's all in one moment. So the couple of questions. Number one, if you go back to the hunter-gatherer experience of mankind before agriculture, wasn't it kind of more like this? Number one, first question. And number two is, once money is kind of algebraically taken out of the equation of our experience, then also we'd have to start thinking about time. Time would also start to have a profoundly different concept in our minds as well. The idea of linear time would start to evaporate, because everything would be happening at the same time in a lot of ways. But the first question is, have you thought about this idea where the hunter-gatherers, before agriculture was invented in 10 or 12,000 years ago, which was really the beginning of scarcity, forced synthetic scarcity in economics, it's all based on hoarding grain, essentially. Before then there was everything was spontaneously available. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say in a hunter-gatherer society, everything was scarce. Like the next prey you caught was a scarce thing. I mean, there were only so many mammoths out in the forest, or if mammoths even lived in the forest. But anyway, I think the connection to gold is the analogy is good, but it's not perfect, because I view Bitcoin as a new element, like the missing piece of the periodic table as well. We have invented an element that is even more scarce than the scarcest of the elements on the periodic table. It's even harder to find new Bitcoin than it is to find new any other element particles. And you can view altcoins or shitcoins as unstable isotopes of this new element that we found on the periodic table, because it has all the some of the properties that gold has, but better ones. Like it's teleportable instead of being heavy, and taking up a lot of space, but it's still got the it's got the scarcity aspects of it going. This doesn't tie into hunter-gatherer society, the hunter-gatherer society question, but I had it on my mind. I wanted to get it out there.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, that's adding an element to the periodic table is fascinating. You know, we've talked about that as well. That it in the past, you know, we've discussed that there could be something like a whole new element on the periodic table, and so the idea though is so I was trying to return to this other idea though, that the money and the language and the idea of mobility all collapse into one moment where, you know, you're usually if you're thinking I have to go drive somewhere, meet somebody and haggle over a price. But here we're saying I'm already in the cosmic global unconscious, and the phrase that I come back to again is knowing is owning. But so is everyone else in that space.
Yeah, and in this sense, money truly becomes time, because there's no boundaries between the two words anymore. And like knowing is owning, time is money. There's something there. They're all connected somehow. We just haven't figured out how yet, because we're so early in
right.
this.
That's the kind of what I was getting at. So it does have like an impact on this concept of time also.
I wouldn't call it global unconsciousness. I'd rather call it the global consciousness, because you need to be conscious about what you're doing in this. You need to be really, really conscious about every decision you make in it. And you need to be conscious about how valuable these things will be in the future and how scarce they are.
Okay, well, here's where I think we might have a slight split in our thinking, because, you know, the global unconscious is like taken from Carl Jung, you know, his work, and he's a contemporary of Freud. And so that within the mind are already preset notions that are hard-coded in terms, and then it's covered with the ego. So if we go down this path that you're describing of really the synthesis of all these things happening at one time, and you eliminate the ego, you get deeper into this unconscious territory where things are happening spontaneously. There's a spontaneity to it where is closer to our nature, our spiritual nature. It's a spiritual quality.
Yeah, I could buy into some of that, but I'm not a huge fan of Carl Jung, actually. And I think he's been popularized by Jordan Peterson a lot lately, whom I view as the Deepak Chopra of Christianity. Because I view Bitcoin as the financial equivalent of atheism. Like when you refuse to buy into any of the religious views, which we have been bombarded with, like I view all the fiat currencies and the current system as a like organized religion being forced upon everyone. Like you have to believe this is how it is, look at this book, and like do whatever we tell you to. And look, with Bitcoin you can verify that every aspect of it, you can verify it yourself, so you can look it up. And to me that is the opposite of believing in something. And that has to do with conscious decisions rather than unconscious decisions. I would say I'm sort of a spiritual person in that I'm curious about how my mind works and how it's connected to the larger universe. But I have no belief whatsoever in a creator or any story that a third party tells me to believe in. I think that faith and belief and whatever spirituality you have for yourself is a very personal thing. And the more we can get away from these stories, that these collective hallucinations like religions, nation states, money, whatever the framework they choose to put on it is, the further away we can get from that, the better off we are. And the more,
I think we're like similarly thinking on that. And but there is something about the human mind that makes us vulnerable and gullible to people who are putting out these messages that end up leading us into wars or leading us into political frenzies or other groupthink that's, at the end of the day, servicing somebody's ego. Now, if you crush the time-space continuum, as we're saying Bitcoin does, and you end up in the ever-present now, where mobility, language, and money are synthesized into one spontaneous it, then, and you essentially kill the ego, I think part of the revelation that'll happen is that we have a more natural inclination toward a more altruistic being, which we get there by which exists right now.
Yeah.
In other, we're peeling the onion.
Absolutely.
We're peeling the onion,
Absolutely.
right? So that's what I mean in this Jungian sense. I mean, Jordan Peterson may have co-opted Carl Jung and put a Christian twist on it. But, I mean, I was studying Carl Jung myself before Jordan Peterson, while he was still doing TV in Canada, and my study and work, have a very different conclusion, because it was on the tail end of the 1960s, where it was about consciousness expansion through like Timothy Leary and LSD and this type of thing.
Yep.
And part of the Orange Pill and the Orange Pill podcast is that what comes after the red pill, because everyone understands, the red pill is, you accept that behind the facade of this blue pill reality is a deeper reality. And we're saying, well, what's behind the red pill? And that's kind of like what you do. And Knut, with your work, is like you're going deeper into that red pill rabbit hole, into the orange pill rabbit hole. So I think we're on the same page there. I just see it in terms of Jungian is like peeling away the onions to find a spontaneous inner core of peace and love. That's there.
Yeah, but I think Bitcoin provides that by providing us with a lot more time, time which we truly own. Because in a truly functioning sound money global free market, the amount of time you will have to spend working is just ridiculously low, because everything will function so much better. All the markets will function so much better, so that you don't really have to work as much as you do now. Everyone works their asses off right now, and everyone's indebted. And yeah.
Right. That comes full circle to my hunter-gatherer comment, because anthropologists tell us that before the revolution of agriculture, the hunter-gatherers had tons of free time, that the actual time spent hunting the pig was very small, and that there was leisure time was aplenty, and the quality of life in that sense was very high. But I don't want to go back into that. But what you were saying?
But in the last few moments here, I want to quickly follow up on that time piece before we have to exit. But I want to ask you, because this notion of time, I find it interesting that the disintegration of time at these major shifts in world superpowers, namely the United States and the Roman Empire before it. Caesar, of course, invented basically the calendar, came up with this formalized calendar and brought it into existence in our Western economy. And it's interesting that when their republic was disintegrating, they lost track of time. They literally lost something like 44 days, because there were like basically like a Fed open market committee that decided when to skip a day or a month, or like they kept on having to add days or subtract days, that they knew there were 365 days and that they had to add it up. But then because the people who were determining when the new day was supposed to be added or subtracted, they themselves were elected into power. So they wanted to extend their time. Anyway, they ended up losing 44 days. And in the past year or two in the United States, global empire of debt, what we've seen is this happen twice as well. We've lost track of time, i.e. time has no value in the bond market where interest rates are negative. That is not supposed to happen. It's never happened in thousands of years of human history. We also saw energy prices go negative for the first time in history as well. So we saw negative energy prices. This is like messing with the fabric of time, that we don't even understand the basic fundamental time and matter and space around us.
And keeping everyone working all the time is stealing time. That is stealing lifetime from everyone. And it's basically a death sentence on everyone, just smeared out over the world's population.
I might say, of course, David Graeber, who passed away today as we were recording this, he came up with that book about bullshit jobs, that these bullshit jobs are created to fill that time, to pretend that we're doing something, when in fact it's just filling your time in order, I guess, for you not to think, to not have a rebirth, to not think of bigger, higher ideals.
Yeah, and we're so blessed to have, for lack of a better word, to have curious minds that just can't help themselves from thinking these things. And back to the grain thing, there's a theory about how wheat actually domesticated us and not the other way around. And I really like that way of thinking.
Well, same thing with
domesticated by
Bitcoin,
wheat.
right? Bitcoin seems to be hacking humans.
Yeah, I can buy that. Yeah, fiat certainly hacked humans, most humans, all but a tiny few that are leeching off of everyone else.
Also, when if you say wheat, played us, domesticated us, right? Does that play into the notion of Gaia, right? Which is the Greek notion that the entire world and universe is one living organism. And
but that was debunked a couple of years back. I'm sorry.
You can't debunk it because it's a philosophy that you either accept or don't accept.
The Gaia
there's no
theory,
debunking there.
No, but there was an actual theory about the world being one organism, but there's really nothing pointing to that. So that.
Well, if you add Bitcoin, then maybe those people who would not accept it would suddenly accept it. If you ask those people who don't accept it, and then ask them, what do you think about Bitcoin? And they'll say, I don't accept Bitcoin. I'm saying, well, then you don't know anything, so therefore let's not listen to them.
I would say that it's sort of dangerous territory to like blend these words and like to use like whatever terms like quantum physics or Gaia theory or whatever, and like not really, because words have different meanings to different people, and they can be misinterpreted a lot. And like with Gaia theory, you mean one thing. Yeah.
So in other words, that's true. All words exist in this cosmic word salad, right? And they all have different meanings to different people. And so when you have a conversation like this, we're trying to refine the definitions to put together some meaningful conversation, right? But that doesn't mean that somebody else looking at the same set of words would generate the same conversation, right?
No.
So I'm using the words as I understand them through the filter of my knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
And as I see it, the Gaia theory is an integral part of the Bitcoin consciousness, because it would hint at, like, when you say knowing is owning, you're taking a leap, an imaginative leap there that we have to get to incrementally with the tools we have available, and that would be words, and mathematics. So we have to go on a path. The path must be tread upon, and the only thing we have to use are words and mathematics. And so, we have the common goal, though, as long as our goal is understood.
And I would say we're back to that part of the rabbit hole now in the conversation, because words, the truest of words are the words in the blockchain, because nothing can be truer than that. We've all agreed that the blockchain did what it did at the times it did at the times the blocks came out, because like when we're talking about different words having different meanings to different people, for the Bitcoin blockchain that doesn't really matter, because that means the same to everyone. And that's part of this knowing is owning thing. We can actually put, like, the word Gaia, for instance, we could put actual value on that word if we wanted to. Like, there's a whole different ballpark here.
Yeah, but Max is always talking about Bitcoin observing us, and that's caused by the game theory. No matter how greedy, Bitcoin draws you to it because of that human thing of greed. Humans are greedy and they want more, right? And they want more value, they want more wealth. But, so humans are drawn to it from greed, but no matter how greedy you want to be, you end up becoming altruistic because of it, because you want to, because you're greedy to maintain your wealth, so you secure the network. So no matter what you do, you're being observed. Are you the observer or the observed? Like, it's hard to tell who's the observer or the observed in this situation.
I wouldn't call it greed, though. I'd call it truth-seeking and, like, a resistance to, like, not wanting to be robbed. That's like the first point.
Yeah, because that you know, Satoshi himself wrote about that. Like, this is what you're incentivizing. Well, how do you get somebody to secure your wealth, to spend their energy, their time, and their effort to secure your wealth? Well, you incentivize them through greed, which is what Bitcoin itself, the unit of account, is. Like, that's incentivizing you to help your neighbor.
Well, we have a hard evidence of this in number go up, right? If if greed wasn't a factor in the Bitcoin protocol, then the price would never go up. The price goes up.
I wouldn't call it greed, though, because greed has such a now I'm into the words again, but greed has such a negative ring to it.
It does.
It's more. It
does have a negative ring to it, but that's where. But it's our fallibility as humans, and it seems like Bitcoin is hacking that and eliminating greed ultimately through the process that you're talking about.
But think about all the Bitcoin OGs that during the last 6 months have sold out because of greed and started promoting shitcoins. That's greed to me.
They stepped off the path of Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So they didn't transition. No. Bitcoin. They didn't hear what Bitcoin was saying. They stepped off the path. But anyway, let me ask you another question though, quickly. So you were saying the words in the white paper are to some degree self-evident, but nevertheless, you know, we had that whole civil war with Bitcoin Cash, who decided that the word cash in the white paper had a separate meaning that was not what we're talking about here today. And they tried to do, and there was the New York Agreement that was very greed driven, and they tried to do a corporate takeover, which ultimately was defeated. So even within the white paper, go ahead.
Greed lost.
It did.
To me,
exactly.
To me, that is greed. And what we're doing in Bitcoin by wanting the number go up technology is not greed. It's low time preference thinking. We want our wealth to be secured and to go up in value over time. There's nothing. It's not necessarily greedy. Like promoting shitcoins and the New York Agreement, that's greed to me. Short-term thinking, enriching yourself fast, and like day trading, that's greed. But like hodling and waiting this thing out or stacking sats, that's not greed. That's just looking out for your future.
Okay, so how about this? So you Knut Svanholm, you're one of millions of Bitcoiners in the world. And I would say that based on it, you know, we've been doing this since 2011. We've talked to thousands of people. We know everybody in this space pretty much. I would say, you know, you are taking the best qualities of this protocol in terms of what it can deliver for humanity and expressing it in a way that is at the leading edge. But you're at the millions and millions of people had to get attracted by simple greed. And then over the course of 5, 6, 7 years, it found Knut, right? So you are the product. You're beyond it. But okay, now we're going to take you're going to take the whole world population to where you are. But to get it there, they've got to have a hunger that's expressed in the simplistic terms that they exist in today. And most people exist in a very greedy mindset. That's the human mind.
Yeah. Let's call it the hungry mindset, then.
Yeah, okay. Let's call it the hungry mind.
Middle ground.
Call it the hungry heart. Let's go full Bruce Springsteen.
My whole theory is from listening to you two talk for the last 15 minutes, I see all words as neutral. Greed, fear, panic, all those words exist. They, you know, we assign a negative connotation to them. But as our previous guest, Nozomi Hayes, mentioned, Western cultures and ideologies tend to reject anything that feels negative, like fear, panic, the part of the human existence, which is, I think, the game theory, the incentives operate based on those fundamental things: greed, fear, love, joy, happiness. So if the protocol is robust, if it's going to survive all those attacks, I think it invites people to want to grab all 21 million coins. Do it. Come at us, man. Come at us, because the more you come at us, the stronger the Bitcoin community
that's
gets.
the point, is that it attracts greed to do 51% attacks, which increases the security, which makes the price go higher. right? So it
completely
has
agree.
greed. It figures out that greed is part.
But the thing is, let me ask you a counter question then. Can you be greedy and altruistic at the same time?
Yes, go listen to our interview with
Okay.
Nozomi Hayes from last week, because this is the genius of the protocol, the number one genius in terms of her, who she's a psychologist. So she sees that as like how brilliant that it turned all your negative qualities into positive. Like no matter how greedy you get, you make it better for everybody else. Okay, you know, the fact is the whole hard fork that happened, that helped everybody. Bitcoin went up, number went up. It went from $1,000 up to $20,000 because of his greed. It changed everything. It changed mindsets. It expanded minds and understanding of Bitcoin. So it was because of that ultimate greed, and we should invite that. That helped.
All right. So
Bitcoin.
the alchemy that Bitcoin performs is transforming a greed of hate into a greed of love.
Yes.
And that you have a transformation and you become greedy for love.
It's transubstantiation. It literally takes your it's alchemy and transubstantiation. It takes your goo, your blood, your bones, your meat space. It takes base desires and it transforms it into something higher.
Like I say in the article, it forces people to provide something of value for each other rather than to rob each other. So in that way, it really turns bad greed into good greed. I can totally buy into that.
That's what I'm saying. It's like you are not going to stop. Every single person on earth wants all 21 million Bitcoin. You'll do whatever it takes. And you doing whatever it takes is going to actually increase the value of Bitcoin itself. It causes you to increase everybody's.
Right. And the idea of wealth goes from how much you take to how much you make. And it goes from how much you take to how much. Another John Lennon lyric, I think, is how much love you leave.
And in the end, the love you make is equal to the love you take.
Yeah, right.
That's
so there's a good love equation. There's an equation of love that Bitcoin helps humans understand in a way that translates over any language, because it's the language of trade. And anyway, Knut, thanks so much, man. We're gonna have to do this again soon.
Thank you, guys. So lovely conversation. Loved it. You have a lot of spacey ideas. I love it.
That was my nickname in school, Spacey Stacy.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Well, so I guess we came to a conclusion about greed, that greed exists throughout human history. And you could either do all sorts of command and control to try to stop it, arrest people, put them in jail, excommunicate them from your church and your religion, or you can come up with a Bitcoin protocol and harness it. And no matter how base that metal is, of an idea, of a feeling, of an emotion, of how humans behave, you convert it into a golden behavior.
Yeah, that's it. That's the theme, isn't it? The transubstantiation, the alchemistic transformation, etc. You know, the thing that Knut said at the very beginning, which just really stuck with me, is that knowing is owning. Knowing is owning. So that's a really interesting phrase. I mean, that is a phrase that really I thought was throughout the whole conversation, that was something that we're kind of talking about in one way or another. And it's a phrase that is so much on the periphery of our daily conversation and how we take in the news and information and in life. You know, we're so, at the moment, particularly now in this election season and everything else that's going on with COVID, everyone, you know, a spiritual deep dive is not on anyone's priority list right now. But that phrase, knowing is owning, you know, this is so rich, such a rich area to explore for anyone in the Bitcoin space. I think it's really, he's onto something there.
That's kind of like up there in the realm of I think, therefore I am. Which was very, very radical at the time. And in fact, Descartes was like excommunicated or threatened with excommunication from the Catholic Church at that time for even saying that.
Right. So the center of consciousness went from essentially the Catholic Church to one's own mind. And so it collapsed the entire organization that was the church. And that was what Descartes was saying, and that was the beginning of the and part of a Renaissance, and we've been talking about it on this show.
Yeah, because it was like basically before then, it was like your ear hears because God gave it hearing qualities. That's there was no biological or any sort of physiological reason behind it, and you thought the ideas that came into your head were there because God put them there. And then
Right, and the
instead,
church was the messenger of God,
the medium
right?
through which you communicated.
and
with
so
it.
all your thoughts are an extension of the very highly centralized church. So if I think, therefore I am, it's decentralization.
Yes.
That means every single individual has the ability to have their own thoughts,
Yes.
and they're not owned by anyone but yourself. And then it tied back to the conversation we just had. It wasn't until the mid 1800s that you had Freud and Carl Jung explore the subconscious and the unconscious mind, and even go further into who we are. And of course, that gave rise, unfortunately, to a huge era, 100 years of anxiety, because people were very comforted by the fact that they didn't have to think for themselves. And so to give people responsibility, it's like in the Bitcoin space. When you give people the responsibility for their own wealth, most of the time, particularly in the first 7 or 8 years, they lose it. We know from giving Bitcoin to people, because there's no work involved for them to get it, they don't think it has value and they throw it away. And that's why out of the 21 million total Bitcoin that'll ever exist, I think up estimates that are 4 million are gone forever from people losing it, but that's part of the transition.
So speaking of transitioning, and also the unconsciousness and consciousness, and also a quantum paradox, I have a video here. We have a video to show you for you from Orange Pill. It's Madge Weinstein.
Hi, Max and Stacy. Look, I'm back. It's me, Madge. Congratulations. Now we're on episode 4 of the Orange Pill. How about those new titles? Aren't they amazing? Wow, so psychedelic. I felt like I was on the acid watching those things. Anyway, a lot of stuff has happened this week. But first, I wanted to mention something very disturbing that happened. It seems that Elon Musk, the sort of chemically imbalanced chairman of Tesla and SpaceX, has been fucking around with people's brains now. And he came out and said, guess what? I can implant thoughts into people's brains, and then we're going to download your personality into some pig, and then it's going to live forever, and it's going to have your personality. And I thought, oh, this is amazing. And I thought about all the philosophical implications of this. Wow, you're going to have chips in people's brains, and wow, it's going to control you, and maybe we're already there in Matrix, and maybe we're already inside a pig. And I am a fat pig, but that's another story. You know what I mean? Like, I was thinking about all the implications of this, assuming that Elon Musk really was doing this. Well, guess what? Then I watched the video, and boy, was it a bunch of bullshit. I watched this video of Elon Musk showing a picture of a pig named Gertrude. And it's just this pig sniffing at some food, and then Elon Musk is narrating it. So every time Gertrude sniffs food, you hear a beep. So it's just this pig go beep, 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 beep. All they fucking did is stick some electrodes in this pig's nose, and when the pig sniffs, it beeps. That ain't shit. That's not implanting a microchip into a pig's brain. That has no implications for the future. That's just showmanship, Trumpian bullshit, and Elon Musk is insane again. The end. So that's all I have to say on that subject. I would have liked to say something more intelligent about it, and how consciousness is amazing, and how we're going to get cloned, and then who's the observer? Is it me or is it the other Madge, and all this shit? But really, it's just bullshit. There's nothing to comment on. It's just like all that self-driving car bullshit. That was supposed to be here by now. Where's my self-driving car? Where's my goddamn Uber that drives itself, Max and Stacy? It ain't fucking here yet, because it doesn't exist. You know why? Because AI is bullshit. You ever try talking to Siri? She doesn't do a goddamn thing you want. Same with Google. If AI was real, you'd be like, hey Siri, get me a hooker, and the hooker would be here eating my vagina out. But it's not happening, Max and Stacy, because AI is bullshit, and so is Elon Musk with his stupid pig bullshit. Wow. Anyway, but that's not really what I wanted to talk about. And maybe it is. But I'll just wrap it up in case that's where you want to end. Well, that's it for me.
Wow. So, like, it's almost like Madge had been observing ourselves in the future, making this episode, because I did not tell her that we were going to be talking about quantum mechanics and the observed and the observer and these sort of notions of what is real.
Yeah, no, it's just the coming together of the minds there. So Elon Musk's Neuralink project, I guess, is the topic here, and the questions are real, and the implications in terms of what we've been talking about today. If in fact Bitcoin is a path toward this golden path, let's call it, of transitioning from greed to altruism, then where does Neuralink fit into this? Because if you've got, is it a corporate intrusion, right? Because is it a corporation that's not going to try to get in between the evolutionary goodness that's happening with Bitcoin to try to siphon off? It's like high frequency trading. If I'm in Neuralink, if I'm via Bitcoin, I've entered into this global conscious or unconscious, depending on how you look at it, and it's frictionless, and the economics are one of incredible deflation, as Jeff Booth would describe it in his work. Then corporations will say, wait a minute, how do we make money? Well, if we stick a Neuralink back into this mix, we can siphon off money like a high frequency trader. It's a high thinking trading mechanism to siphon off your Bitcoin as you think about your seed key. So Musk could be trying to steal our private seed phrases and this concept of owning is knowing and knowing is owning. Well, Musk could be trying to siphon that off through Neuralink. And it's fitting that he's trying this with a pig, because a pig is a symbol of greed, isn't it? The greedy pig.
Yes.
He's trying to take a pig's brain, and a pig is known for eating its own shit. It's a shit-eating pig. I'm as happy as a shit-eating pig, rolling in shit, right? So he's trying to take a pig's greed and stick it back into our mind to defeat Bitcoin. And he himself doesn't own Bitcoin, which is very telling.
He says.
Well, I mean, it's saying he's not predisposed to it because he's more about cloning pigs than he is about getting on the Bitcoin path.
But he also does a lot of work for intelligence agencies, unknown intelligence agencies within the United States, and there are many of them. But so that's, as soon as Madge had mentioned they were going to download our consciousness into a pig, I hadn't even heard of that. And I was like, wow, that could be like a punishment. That seems like a way to torture a human, is like put them in a factory farm pig and where this is going.
Well, this brings up another topic about
Orwell.
Well, what if the 2 points. Number one, it's you could transition, you can move your consciousness into a pig, but you could also move the pig's consciousness into a human. Which is, I think, the immediate game plan for Neuralink, is that to be greedy, to be piggy, to stop the Bitcoin revolution. He wants to try to get in there and mix it up and destroy the path. But in terms of transferring your consciousness into a pig, and if your consciousness is mobile in this way, I've often said now for a number of years that what if immortality becomes reality? Do you really want to live forever if your consciousness can be manipulated by corporations and stuck in a pig, as a torture? Wouldn't it be better just to die? Rest in peace, right? That means the end.
But you won't be allowed to.
Maybe you won't be allowed to ever rest in peace. You're going to be constantly being, your file that is you, of your digital existence, will be used again and again and again to click on ads, and you'll be in virtual casino gulag land.
The other thing that scared me was that when Madge was talking about human consciousness and a Madge clone and who's the one observing or being observed, and then you think, well, then if there's two Madges, who owns her Bitcoin? And
right,
and
it's a Sybil attack with real Sybils.
Yeah, and what is the court system going to look like then? Like who wins in that court case?
Right. If Madge clones herself, then who owns the Bitcoin? That's a good question. And if, in fact, cloning could be a way to... you've opened up a can of worms there.
I'm thinking of Bitcoin Cash, and then BSV tried to clone Bitcoin.
Right.
And that's why everybody got airdropped. If you already owned Bitcoin, you got some BCH and BSV.
Right.
But obviously, it proved not to be Bitcoin. They disintegrated. Everybody recognized it as false, as not a genuine clone.
Okay.
Even though they were exact same, except for a few of the parameters. What are you going to say about that?
Yeah, like what if I had my private keys at Casa and then I clone myself? Could my clone access those private keys?
Well, this is going to be a question. We should actually get Casa on here because we are investors in Casa, keys.casa, and we should ask them what the security measures are if my clone contacts them.
Right, or if my consciousness that would be used as one of the multisigs, if that's teleported to a pig's brain, okay, so then the pig is one of my multisigs. I mean, what's the attack vector there, Jameson Lop?
Imagine like being Max Kaiser and you've been, the police state has put you inside a pig and you're calling up Jameson Lop and you're going, wah, wah. And he's going, what? I don't understand you. God damn it, Jameson!
I'm on the multisig, but I've been teleported into a pig. Wow, that sounds like more lost Bitcoins there.
And again, like here is, we're going to wrap that bit up and maybe pick up that conversation because that's pretty spacey, but we're going to end on our positive note again, because on this transubstantiation theme, I like that notion of the sunexchange.com/orange pill being all about transubstantiation, like you're converting energy from the sun, solar rays from the sun into Bitcoin. And that's like fitting totally with this theme here. We've got another video from Abe.
There is no spoon. Hey Max and Stacy. So we're getting a few comments on the social media from people who are very concerned around the environmental impact of solar panels, particularly at the end of their life when they are decommissioned, and also the energy that's required to make them. So, I mean, firstly, when a solar panel has reached the end of its life, it shouldn't be sent to a landfill. I mean, anyone who's doing so is really missing a trick. There are organizations like PV Cycle, who Sun Exchange uses. At the end of a solar panel's life, they collect them and recycle them in a very responsible manner. Secondly, there is even a better solution. There's an organization called Suncrafter in Berlin that upcycles used solar panels. So if your solar panel is broken, they will refabricate it and deploy it out into disaster relief zones and other emerging markets. They can basically give solar panels a new life. Thirdly, I've seen solar panels that are operating after 40 years of being used. So these things do last a very long time. They're not constantly being used every year like you would a new smartphone. They're equipment built to last. And finally is around the energy consumption used to make solar panels. I mean, back in the day, maybe a solar panel would never have paid back the energy it took to make it. But these days, the energy it takes to make one is paid back in less than a year. And that's especially true if you deploy a solar panel into a very sunny country like here in South Africa. And I think really the main point I really want to get across is that everything takes energy. But if that energy is low cost and have no impact to the environment from solar energy, then it makes no difference how much energy something takes to make. If that energy is abundant and affordable, then let's make solar panels. Let's not use expensive, depleting fossil fuels to manufacture. Let's use clean, affordable, renewable energies to make technologies of the future. But thanks everyone for the question. Let's keep them coming and let's solve these issues one by one. See you all next time.
Wow. That's an impressive little segment there. Abraham Cambridge hits another home run.
Looking very Heisenberg there, that's a good theme fitting in with the theme of this episode. You can't understand all the stuff we were talking about without understanding Heisenberg and the uncertainty principle to understand how uncertain all of this is. Remember, we don't know if this is reality. We don't know if we're observing you or you're observing us right now. Like this could be a two-way mirror.
So true. Now, on Sun Exchange, I noticed that they got a new project up there. I believe it's a school. Some school that's a highly ranked school down in South Africa. They're going to put up the solar panels. You lease a solar panel, and you end up getting Bitcoin from that lease. And that's the deal. And the returns are fantastic, better than any crazy DeFi project. I mean, the DeFi projects, they say, hey, you can make 6-7%. But here with Sun Exchange, you're making a lot more than that. And you're also helping the school get the energy. And you're also helping to convert the world to Bitcoin, to a Bitcoin standard. Because, I guess Abraham Cambridge, he had a double enlightenment, did he? He had the Bitcoin enlightenment and the solar panel enlightenment at the same time. He's doubly enlightened.
Doubly enlightened. I think it's, the sunexchange.com/orange pill is the way to go. And I've been in our Telegram group chatting with people about this. And we kind of decided to do a whole group chat on Zoom. I don't know how many dozens of people were all going to sign up to this project over at the sunexchange.com/orange pill of the school in South Africa. Is like, we'll all push buy at the same time or participate in some way on Zoom. What do you think about that? I think I could put up to 40, 50 people into the Zoom frame.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of fun. I love this company. I love the project. Abraham Cambridge is like Elon Musk level entrepreneur and engineer. And this is just going to continue to hit home run after home run. This is a fantastic story.
But Abe Cambridge would never download your Bitcoin wallet into Elon Musk's pig
He would
brain.
never try to put your Bitcoin into a pig. He would never. He's got the orange fever. He's got a fever. He's got the orange fever. Elon Musk is out there, in a pigsty trying to transport a pig's brain into somebody else's brain to steal their Bitcoin. We don't want that. That's not what we're about. Look at Madge Weinstein. She's every week it's more and more beautiful. That's what Bitcoin can do to you. It not only beautifies your wallets and your wealth, but look at just that exquisite figure and countenance. This is an amazing transformation into a freaking beauty queen.
I had never heard of lesbians being into the bear thing, like a big hairy chest, but apparently it's now spread from the G part of the LGBT community to the L part of the community. So
hairy-chested lesbians are hot this year. It's all about the Eurovision. If you can win Eurovision with a cherry-chested lesbian, with a cherry-chested lesbian, then you're on the right orange pill frequency.
All right. Well, that's a good time. I think, you know what? This is the first episode with our full titles. So I'm going to actually play our titles again at the end here because we worked so hard on these titles and I think they're pretty amazing. Our friend Stefano over in London, he's Italian, but he lives in London and he made these amazing titles. And thanks again to Julian Moore and Sean Lennon and Charlotte Camp Mule, of course, for the theme tune. So we're going to play that out right now.
Orange pill. Orange pill. Orange